I'm Tony Ruiz of Gold Derby here with Jonathan Bailey, who stars in Fellow Travelers. And Johnny, I just want to get right to it because you get to do something that I think so many people wish they could do, and that is experience and live an entire life of queer history through fiction. And so I'm curious, what was the biggest takeaway that you took from playing this character over the course of this more than 30-year stretch?
Brilliant question. I felt incredibly cathartic. I think in the instance of Tim and this particular sort of period of history, there's so much but there's so much joy in the brutality, really, and it's about mining and finding that joy. That it was incredibly informative and cathartic to experience that in the safe realm of fiction, but also to have that opportunity to really sort of educate myself, but also have the joint experience of being around a very sort of compassionate, loving group of people, and led by Ron Nicewainer, who wrote it. And it's, for me, it feels like it's a love letter and a sort of a warning to us all about what can happen. And I felt that the thing that I really took away from it was the contraction and the release of queer liberation. That and that's what I felt that Tim felt really strongly, the push and the pull of the moments of extreme aggressive control on queer people, that's then followed by these beautiful moments of joy and release. And how that cycle is really, over time, really tiring. But yeah, I mean, listen, I'm here today because of all the people that came before me, and every gay man and every gay woman and everyone who doesn't experience full privilege knows exactly what that feels like. So to be able to go and explore that, but then also to sort of create something that I think is a gift to everyone, not just the community, has been something. I know I'm going to be. I've said that I haven't grieved Tim, and I don't think I ever will, but I really do think that it's changed sort of who I am, I think, or at least focused in bits of myself that I didn't really realize. So anyway, I could just go on and on, but for me, it was a life-changing and informative thing. And I know that I would have loved to watch it had I not been in it. I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to me because you said you haven't grieved Tim. Does that mean that this character really has stayed with you after the fact? Was this a tough character to say goodbye to you?
Yeah, but for all the right reasons. I think he's an icon. I think sitting in his the sort of effervescent fervor he has in his quest for truth and honesty and fairness, which is led by a kindness and a powerful vulnerability that I think is afforded by religion, weirdly. That there's something about him, he's incredibly special, I think, in himself, but the world that he was born into, he tries to match what it must have been to be that sort of boy from Staten Island and a big Irish Catholic family in a safe world, that if he'd said his prayers and if he'd remained in that belief system, and if he'd have continued to be what was deemed lovable, he would have felt incredibly safe all his life. And so he's had that as his grounding sort of hardware, and then of course he then is exposed to a whole world, including Hawkins Fuller, who is kind of surviving in the opposite way, and that's why it's a beautiful love story, really. But no, I think he's always fighting. He's not a doe-eyed ingenue. He's annoying, and he can be precocious, and I read that on the page, and I wanted to see that, because I think that's something that maybe I understand about myself. But or I see in other people. I've never known people just to go into things and go, love is painful, it's brutal, especially if you're in that environment, and if you're in a regime like the Lavender Scare, which I know you're a teacher, but I didn't know anything about that. Is it ever talked about in school? Or maybe I bet you're as you are the teacher of fabulosity. Do you talk about that? I mean,
Well, but yeah, I think one of the things that this show reflects in terms of that I responded to just in terms of my own career is the evolution of things over time. I mean, I've been teaching, for over 20 years. And so, one's identity in relationship to their work has certainly evolved over just the last 20 years. And I think that one of the things I respond to, particularly with Tim, is that his identity equally evolves, that he has to come to grips with some real realizations about what he wants and what he's allowed to want.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's sort of, his quest is for acceptance, I think. He, to me, feels exactly the same in spirit all the way through. But what an amazing challenge as well, because especially when we leave the, to know where he ends up, which is tragic. But what I loved about the detail of the design of the set is he has Buddhist flags in his 1980s flat in San Francisco. He has crystals. He's someone who is always seeking other ways to understand human experience, which, is tiring, I think, probably for him. But then once I think it's episode halfway through the season, you start jumping decades, and he sort of appears as completely different people. And I think then at the crux of it is this extreme, grinding, contrasting, aggressive sort of duality between, feeling lovable and not feeling lovable, or there's such shame in Tim, and that's in everyone, and including Lucy, and that's what's so brilliant about it. It opens it out into so many different ways in which shame can permeate. But it's the push and the pull which keeps him alive, and that's what I think I took away from it is to always never lose your curiosity. But yeah, it's brutal for him, and I just sort of, and for Hawke, they're both warriors, as in they are warriors and they are icons, and the choices that they made are completely valid, actually. But I do think that, society moves and changes for the better because of people like Tim, who are willing to
Yeah, well, yeah, and that duality, that push and pull that is such at the heart of Tim, is that what keeps him coming back to Hawke, what keeps them together? Because, there are moments in the series where I think most rational people would look at Tim and go, run. But what is it? Is that one of the things that keeps him coming back to Hawke?
Yeah, you have to remember the context for their love is like, you didn't have, they weren't sort of rational, grounded friends who could talk to you about your relationship. That he would experience something with Hawke that was like as close to his understanding of what his experience with God probably growing up, and those moments when they're together, which are some of my favorite in the story, where they're safe and they're in Hawkins' apartment or in Tim's apartment between the hours of 11 and 3 before the sun comes up. That's what he's holding on to. And I think also he's not, they're not afforded a typical romantic love story, and that's what's so brilliant about it. And it is a push and pull. And also he believes that the act of loving, and which is something that we can all learn from, is more, has more power to it, and is more what's the word? It's more fulfilling to be the one loving harder than the one who's not receiving the love. And I think that's what he understands about his experience, and what Hawkins has given him is a life of being able to love, and he never gives up on Hawke, really. I mean, he does, but they come back together. But he never, there's never really anyone else for Tim. And I think that's really interesting in a full circle. Much of many things in the arc, and why it's so definitely and beautifully constructed, is that, to me, that seems to be about religion, and about he is born with a toolkit to be able to believe in something that he can't see, and something that doesn't love him back. And that is also in his parents, in his religion. And so of course I understand why he stayed. And also he's the best in everyone, and I think he grows, he evolves, and I think he also secretly expects that of Hawkins. And anyway, I wonder how it would have played out 50 years later.
Yeah, so did I. I do want to ask very quickly about, you mentioned earlier about the, just the way that the production design works, and I've spoken to both Anastasia and Joseph LaCourt, the brilliant costume designer, and I'm curious, just from an acting, how helpful is it? How does it influence your performance when you have those kinds of outside details like surrounding you? Does it make getting into the performance, and particularly when you have to cover this many decades, does it make that easier or less challenging?
Oh, it makes it so much easier. And also because there's such a wealth of understanding in terms of, as a Brit coming into it, understanding just, American history, obviously American politics, but the way that Americans interact. And there's so much within just the detail of the character in terms of emotion, and what they're experiencing, blah, blah, blah. But I do remember when I was filming filming Bridgerton, and I remember I was gonna do it. And the first thing that I saw about the characters, having spoken to Ron and Dan, the director, were Michelle, Jordan, and Joseph's sketches. And it was such a big moment because, it's brilliant. Like this, that's what the collaboration is all about. But you wouldn't be able to tell this story in a way and not completely be, taking in everyone else's brilliant ideas. But the craftsmanship on this was just extraordinary, and the research that Ron did, and he lived with this for 10 years, and it took 10 years for him to bring it together and to get it made. So yeah, I think when you're turning up with the detail of design, and Ori, who was my makeup designer, I realized how amazing people are at their jobs, and also what you see on camera is obviously a performance, but there's 50 to 100 other people who have poured their life and soul into it. And I think the brilliant thing about Fellow Travelers is that everyone has an experience that they can relate to in it, and especially when you've got a predominantly queer sort of creative team as well.
Well, and I want to ask, because I know much has been made of the intimacy on the show, and frankly, the question I actually want to ask about that is, do you think we're going to be reaching a point where that doesn't become a centerpiece of it, where people aren't commenting, "Ooh, look at how much sex there is," because it's more becomes about a love story between people rather than a quote unquote gay love story?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I think anyone who watches Fellow Travelers and their main takeaways is, but what about the sex scenes? You're like, well, yeah, they're hot and they're brilliant, but only talk about them in the way that they expand the understanding of the characters and exactly what's going on. Yeah, sure, why not? Let's get to a point where we don't have to talk about it. It's weirdly the least thrilling thing for me to talk about.
Right.
And also people are surprised and they go, God, when you see those written on the page, what do you think? And you go, well, what an amazing opportunity. And that's exactly what you would want, because it's a full rounded experience of these people who are in love. And if you're dealing with the sort of socio-political landscape by which these two people come together, and you're dealing with the way that the oppression and the shame is dripping through from the leaders, of course you need to see how that affects the two people coming together. And the truth is that it is incredibly intimate and vulnerable, and it's like the sex scenes are like a battleground for them, I think, in order to feel safe and loved and all the things that other people are afforded so easily. And that's the key right there. It's because it's the only place where they can be afforded it so easily. Totally. And I also wondered, I was like, I wonder if people, as in I know they would, there's so many things about this that I just think, gosh, people can watch Fellow Travelers and they'll just learn so much, because of course, so many people don't need to think about what gay experience must have been like for the last 50, 60 years. But when you watch it and you go, oh, I now can understand that there were no safe places for these people to come together. And, going into the bathrooms and the toilets and, having to leave really early and everything being pushed underground, and the shame and the hyper vigilance that's needed. It's survival. It's also hot, and it's all those things, but it's not something
Right.
that should be written off as perverted, and it's
Yeah.
not. It's a beautiful thing, and it just in the way that, you know, we have been cultured to love beautifully written scenes with two people declaring their love at the end of, you know, an hour and a half of cinema. It's like, it's just such an equally as beautiful thing to see people come together, and not only that, over 8 hours of TV to explore how their bodies mean different things and evolve with them, and to see that the two characters do not have that intimacy that they have with each other with anyone else. So that's also why it allows you to understand when they come together that there is something magical about the two of them, and it is some kind of cosmic, and that's what it feels like for Tim, I think.
Just last question. You know, started on the stage, and you still go back to the stage. I'm curious, going forward in your career, because you've had, you know, between Bridgerton and Fellow Travelers and things like that, you go back and forth between stage and film and TV. And so, is that variety? Why is that variety so important to you?
Yeah, I just think it's like, it feels like you sort of, I feel like you're just honing the craft. I think I wouldn't have been able to give the Fellow Travelers performance had I not been on stage for you know, 12, 16 weeks in the run up to it. And there's something that happens. You feel sharp. You feel, you know, when you're telling a story in front of a live audience every single night. And, you know, the theatre is kind of the actor's medium, because you work, you know, I was working with Marion Elliott, who I love as a theatre director, and I really genuinely, what I can do, I learned from theatre directors and being in a rehearsal room. So yeah, it's just it works for me for it to be a cycle, and to because yeah, it's just a different thing. It's just like you need to use every part of your body in the theatre, and then, you know, variety is the spice of life. And also, just, you know, if you can go between the two, it gives you space to, it's like different, it feels like it uses different creative juices. So, you know, it's much like you know, making a cocktail. You just want to get all the ingredients right. Yeah.
Well, Johnny, congratulations. I hope you know that this is a show that's going to live forever, and a whole generation of young people are going to see this show, and it's going to mean a lot to them.
I feel incredibly proud about that, and that's down to my Swainer. But yeah, that's great.
Everybody go to goldderby.com, make your predictions for the upcoming award season, and stay tuned for interviews with more contenders in the coming weeks. Jonathan Bailey, congratulations. A real pleasure. Thank you.
Happy birthday tomorrow.
Thank you.